Welcome back to an introduction to recovery residences. This video is going to be talking about social model recovery. This is actually my favorite topic to talk about. Oftentimes, I refer to it as the roux in a good gumbo. I live here in Texas. We're close to Louisiana. We get some good gumbo. And I know that you can throw a bunch of things in a pot and boil it up, but that's not gumbo. What makes gumbo is that roux, that goodness that coats everything in the pot and makes it taste amazing. And so when I think of social model recovery and how it is that ubiquitous support within recovery residences, I think of the roux in a good gumbo. So, as a reminder, recovery residences promote recovery. This is done through social model recovery, which we're about to talk about, by providing four supportive dimensions, upholding recovery principles, and by increasing recovery capital. So, what is social model recovery? It is a recovery oriented chronic care approach to substance use disorders. Philosophically and in its practices, it's very different than the medical or clinical based treatment models that you may be more familiar with. It emphasizes social and interpersonal aspects of recovery using recovery as the common bond across residents, across staff, and across alumni. It values experiential knowledge and mutual support to a very high degree, and it views recovery as a person driven, lifelong, and a holistic process. So the question is, how do we measure it? How do we make sure that a recovery residence or any program is using social model philosophy? Well, luckily, Dr. Kaskudis and a couple of other researchers developed the social model philosophy scale. This scale was a assessment tool that was used to capture changes in treatment program philosophies over a period of time. This was done in the 1990s when many treatment programs were moving away from social model philosophy more towards the medical or clinical model. So there are six domains that are used in the social model philosophy scale. And in the next couple of slides, we're going to be taking a look at each one of these domains and how it manifests within a recovery residence to ensure that your recovery residence is using social model philosophy. So the first is the physical environment, and we would assess this by asking to what degree does the recovery residence feel like a home? So, social model philosophy or programs that use social model philosophy are architecturally and functionally like a home or home like. From an architectural standpoint, it needs to promote interaction and thus promote recovery. We could be looking at the percentage, the square footage percentage dedicated to community space versus, say, office space. If the entire property is dedicated to, bedrooms and offices, that is not a social model program. We definitely want to have ample community space, indoors as well as perhaps even outdoors, that really facilitate and bring people together for peer support. Also, it functions like a family. The environment facilitates individuals. They may be cooking community meals together, sharing chores, having family meetings, having celebrations. We need to think of the physical environment as this platform to support recovery. The next domain is the staff role. And we need to ask ourselves, to what degree is this program or this recovery residence have staff that is staff respected peers versus distant superiors, that kind of hierarchy. We want to create an environment where there's a flat hierarchy, or as flat as possible, where individuals feel like this is our recovery residence rather than we're just here being served by these distant superiors. Staff are allowed, encouraged, and oftentimes required to mingle in with the participants. Some of the best engagements are going to be happening in Smoker's Corner or over a meal. The interaction between staff and residents should not only happen in the context of a scheduled meeting within a closed office or a group room. Also, peer leaders play significant and meaningful roles. As individuals progress in their own recovery, they are rewarded with additional responsibility, these peer leadership roles. And so it again has them being a part of this process. Next is the domain of authority base, and we measure it by asking the question, to what degree is authority based on lived experience? Leaders and staff within recovery residences are by and large persons in recovery. Most often, they are individuals who've graduated from that particular recovery residence or alumni, or maybe they've graduated from similar recovery residence programs. Staff members have key roles that don't require clinical credentials. If your program, all the senior and mid staff are licensed clinicians, and only that direct support staff, or maybe resident leaders, are the ones that have lived experience, that might not be the best way to support social model recovery. Residents, individuals in recovery, need to see individuals like them reflecting recovery in the highest leadership positions. And mutual aid and peer-to-peer support is highly encouraged within social model programs. The next domain is recovery orientation, and we have to ask ourselves, to what degree is the program recovery oriented? How does it talk about itself? Does it describe itself as a recovery program or recovery residence or recovery center? Or does it describe itself more in a clinical terms, like a treatment center or a treatment center? How we talk about the individuals receiving services can make a difference around recovery orientation. Are they referred to as participants or residents, or are they called clients, or other clinical terms like patients? That would even be more extreme for a if you're using that language, it sounds a lot more like treatment, clinical treatment, rather than a social model program. Also, all residents and likely staff as well have recovery plans, and these are person-driven recovery plans. And many recovery residences that use social model also promote life skills development. That's both formally and informally promoting life skills development. The next domain is governance. To what degree does accountability involve peers? The social model programs utilize peers to establish and enforce program rules. That's different than what you would typically see in a clinical setting. This allows participants or residents to feel more invested or vested in the program. This is our recovery residence. This is our recovery. We are a recovery family, and we have influence over the governance. It's my responsibility to hold myself accountable and to hold other people accountable, and I expect them to do the same for me. That's the concept of this peer governance. And this gives participants a way of developing a new set of skills. They're just not sitting back and receiving services. They're an active part and participating in establishing rules and enforcing rules within the program. And lastly, we have community orientation. This domain is assessed by asking the question, to what degree is the community viewed as a resource? Individuals must learn how to connect with community resources. And when I say community resources, I'm talking about, supportive friends, mentors, social activities, social services, employment opportunities, and much, much more. We don't want to create a bubble. We don't want to create a cult where people only feel supported while they stay within the confines of this bubble. But as soon as they step out, they've never learned how to find and be resourceful and connecting with outside support. So it's imperative in social model programs that individuals are encouraged to connect with these outside resources. It's also looking at the community as a resource by inviting the greater recovery community in, as appropriate, into the recovery residence to support recovery and leadership and mutual aid within the home, and also linking residents to the recovery mentors and recovery activities in the outside community. So we'll be talking a lot more about social model recovery and some of the other modules, and even some advanced modules around social model recovery, because this is a really key concept and a big part of the success of recovery residences. But for now, that concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that you tune in for the rest of the series.